A teenager accused of killing 4 people at his high school in Georgia.
Another school shooting in the United States.
Female victim, she's been shot in the abdomen as well as a through and through into the hand.
Police said the 6-year-old brought a handgun to a first-grade classroom and deliberately shot the teacher.
This was not an accidental shooting.
It is now restricted emergency traffic only, 927.
Dude, it's not worth it. Put it down.
Put it down.
I guarantee you, dude, I promise you. Look, I don't make promises I can't keep. I don't make promises I can't keep. I promise you that.
The history of school shootings is a haunting and heartbreaking stain on modern society, one filled with senseless violence, shattered families, and communities left grasping for answers that may never come. These tragedies are not just statistics. They are stories of young lives lost, of warnings ignored, and of final words that echo long after the gunfire fades. I am sorry, Mom. These were some of the last words left behind by troubled young shooters, scribbled in journals, whispered before pulling the trigger, or uttered in police interrogation rooms. Some begged for help long before they reached their breaking point, their cries drowned out by a system that failed them. Others meticulously planned their attacks, inspired by violent media, online radicalization, or the desire to make their names infamous. From Kip Kinkle's chilling rampage to Ethan Crumbley's premeditated massacre, from Barry Lukaitis' revenge-driven attack to Jesse Osborne's disturbing obsession with past shooters, each of these cases is a grim reminder of the warning signs that were missed or ignored. Whether it was Ethan's disturbing classroom sketches crying out for help, Jalen Freiberg's heartbreaking descent after a painful breakup, or the eerie detail in Jesse Osborne's journal outlining his plan to surpass the body count of past shootings, one thing is clear. These acts of violence did not come out of nowhere. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of these cases is how preventable many of them were. Teachers, parents, and even friends often saw the red flags but were unable or unwilling to act in time. The legal system, in some instances, has started holding parents accountable, as seen in Ethan Crumbley's case, where his parents were charged with involuntary manslaughter. Yet, for every case that sparks a change in law, dozens more leave behind nothing but grief and unanswered questions. This deep dive into some of the youngest school shooters in history will explore their motivations, the tragic aftermath, and the questions that continue to haunt the families of both victims and perpetrators. Each story is a painful lesson, a warning that must not be ignored. Kip Kinkle's story is one of a troubled youth spiraling into violence. Born on August 30th, 1982, in Springfield, Oregon, Kip was the son of Bill and Faith Kinkle, both respected high school Spanish teachers. Despite growing up in what seemed like a loving and stable home, Kip struggled from an early age with severe learning disabilities, most notably dyslexia. School was a constant source of frustration for him, and despite his parents' efforts to support his education, he often felt inadequate compared to his peers. Kip's behavioral issues became evident in elementary school, where he had difficulty concentrating and controlling his temper. His parents sought professional help and enrolled him in special education programs to help him cope with his learning disabilities. However, despite their best efforts, Kip's anger and aggression continued to grow. By middle school, he began engaging in delinquent activities such as shoplifting, vandalism, and bringing weapons to school. As Kip entered his teenage years, his fascination with violence became more pronounced. He developed an obsession with firearms, explosives, and mass murderers, frequently consuming violent media, including books and movies that glorified destruction. He also showed a keen interest in bomb making, collecting instructions from the internet and experimenting with small explosive devices in the woods near his home. His parents, worried about his escalating behavior, placed him in counseling, but Kip resisted any attempts to address his emotional struggles. Kip's father, Bill Kinkle, who had a strict and disciplined approach to parenting, often clashed with his son. Bill believed that tough love and structure would help Kip overcome his behavioral issues, while his mother, Faith, took a more compassionate approach. This difference in parenting styles often created tension in the household. Bill was particularly frustrated with Kip's academic failures and his inability to meet expectations, further straining their relationship. By high school, Kip's behavior had escalated significantly. He had become socially withdrawn, often making disturbing jokes about killing people and expressing admiration for school shooters. His peers noticed his dark humor and fascination with violence, but most dismissed it as an attempt to seek attention. Kip's teachers, however, grew increasingly concerned about his behavior and violent outbursts. In May 1998, Kip's life took a horrifying turn. On May 19th, he was caught at school with a stolen handgun in his locker. The weapon, a .32 caliber Beretta, had been purchased illegally from a friend. When school authorities discovered the gun, Kip was immediately suspended and sent home. That evening, his father confronted him about the incident, expressing his deep disappointment. This confrontation was a breaking point for Kip. On May 20th, 1998, Kip retrieved a .22 caliber rifle from his home and fatally shot his father in the back of the head. When his mother arrived home later that evening, he met her in the garage and shot her multiple times. He then dragged both of their bodies into the bathroom, covering them with a sheet. Afterward, he played music loudly and left a note confessing to the murders but expressing confusion and despair over his actions. The following morning, Kip, armed with a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle and a 9mm Glock pistol, drove to Thurston High School. As students gathered in the cafeteria before classes began, Kip opened fire, killing 2 students, Ben Walker and Mikhail Nicolosin, and injuring 25 others. The attack ended when a group of brave students tackled Kip, wrestled his weapons away, and restrained him until the police arrived. Despite his small stature, Kip struggled violently, screaming that he wanted to die. During police interrogations, Kip displayed a chilling detachment from his actions. He admitted to killing his parents, but expressed a sense of inevitability, saying, "I had no other choice." Psychological evaluations later determined that Kip suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, a severe mental disorder characterized by delusions, hallucinations, and disorganized thinking. His mental illness had gone undiagnosed and untreated for years, exacerbating his violent tendencies. Kip Kinkle was charged with 4 counts of murder and multiple counts of attempted murder. In 1999, he pleaded guilty to all charges, avoiding a trial. He was sentenced to 111 years in prison without the possibility of parole. His case remains one of the most infamous examples of adolescent mass violence, sparking debates about mental health, gun control, and the role of parents in preventing such tragedies.
Fay and Parkland, Sandy Hook and Columbine, there was Thurston. Kip Kinkle opened fire in the Thurston High School cafeteria 20 years ago today, killing 2 and wounding 25 others. Kinkle had killed his parents the day before. The deadly shooting at Thurston High School in Springfield, Oregon, a lasting memory of where we live.
Jalen Freiberg, a 15-year-old from Marysville, Washington, was a popular student and a star athlete. He was well-liked by his peers, a homecoming prince, and was seen as a future leader in his Childre tribe. However, beneath his confident exterior, Jalen was struggling with emotional turmoil that would ultimately lead to a devastating act of violence. Jalen had a seemingly normal and happy life. He came from a close-knit Native American family, was active in his community, and enjoyed hunting and fishing. However, in the months leading up to the shooting, those closest to him began to notice changes in his behavior. His social media posts began to take on a darker tone, often referencing heartbreak, betrayal, and sadness. One of the key factors that appeared to contribute to Jalen's emotional distress was a painful breakup. He had been in a relationship with a girl he deeply cared about, but the relationship ended, leaving him heartbroken. To make matters worse, his former girlfriend started dating one of his close friends, which intensified his feelings of anger and betrayal. In addition to his personal struggles, Jalen had also been suspended from school shortly before the shooting for a physical altercation, further alienating him from his peers. On October 24, 2014, Jalen invited several of his closest friends and family members to lunch in the cafeteria at Marysville-Pilchuck High School. What seemed like a friendly gathering soon turned into a nightmare. As his friends sat together, Jalen suddenly pulled out a .40 caliber Beretta handgun and opened fire. He shot 5 students at point-blank range, killing 4 of them and seriously injuring another. As the cafeteria erupted into chaos, Jalen then turned the gun on himself and died at the scene. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the community, leaving many in disbelief. One of the most unsettling aspects of the shooting was that Jalen's victims were not random classmates, but his own close friends and relatives. Many struggled to understand why someone who was so beloved would commit such an act of violence against those he cared about most. An investigation into the shooting revealed that the handgun Jalen used had been illegally purchased by his father. As a result, his father was later convicted of federal firearms violations and sentenced to prison for his role in the unlawful possession of the gun. In the aftermath of the shooting, many experts pointed to a combination of untreated mental health issues, the intense pressures of adolescence, and easy access to firearms as contributing factors. Jalen's case highlighted the importance of addressing emotional distress in young people before it escalates into violence. It also sparked discussions within the Childre community about the need for increased mental health awareness and support for young people dealing with emotional and social struggles. The Marysville-Pilchuck High School shooting remains one of the most tragic school shootings in recent history. Ethan Crumbley, a 15-year-old from Oxford, Michigan, carried out one of the most chilling school shootings in recent history. On November 30th, 2021, Ethan entered Oxford High School with a 9mm SIG Sauer SP 2022 handgun and opened fire, killing 4 students and injuring 8 others. The attack sent shockwaves through the community as it became evident that numerous warning signs had been ignored leading up to the massacre. Just hours before the shooting, Ethan had drawn disturbing images on a school assignment, including a gun, a bleeding figure, and the words, "Help me," and "Blood everywhere." Concerned teachers alerted school officials, prompting an emergency meeting with Ethan's parents, Jennifer and James Crumbley. School counselors urged him to take Ethan home that day, but they refused, leaving him at school without checking his backpack. Inside that backpack was a handgun they had purchased for him just days earlier as an early Christmas present. At approximately 12:51 p.m., Ethan entered a bathroom, emerged with a handgun, and began his deadly rampage. He fired indiscriminately in the hallway, striking multiple students. The victims, Tate Meyer, 16, Madison Baldwin, 17, Hannah St. Juliana, 14, and Justin Schilling, 17, lost their lives, while 8 others, including a teacher, were injured. The attack lasted only 5 minutes before Ethan surrendered to responding law enforcement officers without resistance. Following his arrest, chilling details about Ethan's planning emerged. Prosecutors revealed that he had meticulously prepared for the shooting, researching past school massacres and writing in his journal about his desire to carry out an attack. Authorities also uncovered social media posts in which Ethan expressed violent thoughts and admiration for previous mass shooters. The case took an unprecedented turn when Ethan's parents were charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Prosecutors argued that Jennifer and James Crumbley had ignored glaring red flags about their son's deteriorating mental state. They had not only purchased a gun for him, but also failed to secure it properly. Additionally, when school officials voiced concerns about Ethan's alarming drawings, his parents dismissed them, opting to leave him in school rather than seek immediate help. During the trial, the prosecution presented damning evidence, including Ethan's journal entries detailing his intent to commit mass murder and the Crumbleys' negligent actions leading up to the tragedy. Text messages from Jennifer Crumbley to her son surfaced, showing her downplaying his struggles and encouraging him to learn not to get caught when he was caught researching ammunition in class. The jury found Ethan guilty of multiple counts of first-degree murder and terrorism, sentencing him to life in prison without parole.
Any sentence that they ask for, I ask that you do impose it on me, because I want them to be happy and I want them to feel secure and safe.
Jennifer and James Crumbley also face a highly publicized trial, with prosecutors emphasizing their responsibility in enabling their son's actions. Their conviction marked the first time in U.S. history that parents were held criminally accountable for a school shooting carried out by their child. They were sentenced to lengthy prison terms, setting a legal precedent for parental responsibility in cases of juvenile gun violence. Ethan Crumbley's case remains one of the most significant school shootings in recent history due to its legal ramifications and the tragic failure to intervene despite multiple warning signs. Jesse Osborne, a 14-year-old from Townville, South Carolina, carried out a shocking act of violence on September 28, 2016. Armed with a .40 caliber handgun, Jesse first shot and killed his father, 47-year-old Jeffrey Osborne, at their home. After the murder, Jesse stole his father's truck and drove to Townville Elementary School, located about 3 miles away. Surveillance footage later showed Jesse speeding through a field behind the school before crashing into a fence near the playground. At approximately 1:45 p.m., Jesse exited the truck and immediately began firing toward the playground, where young children were playing during recess. His first shot struck first-grade student Jacob Hall, as well as 2 teachers who attempted to shield the students. Chaos erupted as children ran for safety, with some seeking shelter inside classrooms while others fled toward the surrounding woods. Jesse continued firing indiscriminately, but after expending several rounds, his gun jammed. This malfunction likely prevented further casualties. A volunteer firefighter, Jamie Brock, who was in the area, rushed toward Jesse and managed to tackle and restrain him until law enforcement arrived. Officers quickly secured the scene and took Jesse into custody without further incident. The aftermath of the shooting was devastating. 6-year-old Jacob Hall, who had been shot in the leg, suffered severe blood loss and was airlifted to a nearby hospital. Despite the efforts of medical professionals, he succumbed to his injuries 3 days later. The other 2 victims, both teachers, survived but endured lasting trauma from the event. Investigations into Jesse's actions revealed disturbing details about his motivations and mindset. Authorities discovered online messages in which he had spoken about his plans to commit a mass shooting, as well as journal entries that detailed his admiration for previous school shooters. Jesse had reportedly idolized the perpetrators of the Columbine High School massacre and had expressed a desire to surpass their death toll. His writings, combined with testimony from those who knew him, painted a picture of a deeply troubled teenager consumed by violent fantasies. During his trial, prosecutors argued that Jesse was fully aware of the consequences of his actions and had meticulously planned the attack.
Your hair straight whenever you go shoot someplace up, you know? Gotta look fabulous, you know? Just gotta look fabulous.
They presented evidence that he had carried out extensive research on previous school shootings and had even practiced with firearms prior to the incident. The defense, however, attempted to argue that Jesse's mental health played a significant role in his behavior, citing his history of depression and social isolation. In 2018, Jesse Osborne was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, but in 2019, a judge modified his sentence to 75 years, citing his age at the time of the crime. The case drew national attention, sparking debates about juvenile sentencing in mass shootings. Some advocates argued that Jesse, despite his heinous actions, should have the opportunity for rehabilitation, while others believed that his calculated attack warranted a life sentence. The tragedy also reignited discussions about school security, mental health intervention, and the influence of violent online content on impressionable youths. Townville Elementary School implemented enhanced security measures following the attack, including increased surveillance and stricter visitor policies. The school community also established memorials to honor Jacob Hall, whose death left a deep impact on his classmates, teachers, and the local community. Jesse Osborne's case remains one of the most chilling examples of a young perpetrator carrying out a school shooting. On February 2nd, 1996, 14-year-old Barry Lukaitis walked into his algebra classroom at Frontier Middle School in Moses Lake, Washington, armed with a .30-30 hunting rifle and 2 handguns. Wearing a long trench coat, he concealed the weapons as he entered the classroom. Without warning, he pulled out the rifle and began firing, immediately killing his teacher, Leona Cares, and 2 students, Manuel Vila and Arnold Fritz. Another student, 13-year-old Natalie Hint, was critically injured but survived the attack. As Barry continued firing, chaos erupted in the classroom. Students dug for cover, scrambling to escape the line of fire. Some ran out of the room while others cowered under desks, trying to avoid being shot. Barry appeared emotionless, methodically aiming at his victims. Witnesses later recalled that he displayed no hesitation, no remorse, and no outward signs of distress as he carried out the attack. The massacre was brought to an end when John Lane, a gym coach, entered the classroom after hearing the gunshots. Seeing Barry holding the rifle, Lane quickly assessed the situation and decided to intervene. Risking his own life, he lunged at the young gunman, managing to wrestle the firearm away. Lane subdued Barry and pinned him against the wall until law enforcement arrived. Thanks to his bravery, further loss of life was prevented. Barry was taken into custody without further resistance. During his interrogation, he showed little emotion and gave cryptic responses about his motives. It was later revealed that Berry had carefully planned the attack, modeling it after violent movies and literature. One of the most disturbing influences was Stephen King's novel Rage, which detailed a student holding his classmates hostage at gunpoint. Investigators also discovered that Berry had been fascinated by real-life school shootings and had written disturbing journal entries about committing violence himself. During his trial, Berry's defense argued that he suffered from bipolar disorder and depression, conditions that were exacerbated by years of being bullied. His legal team claimed that he was not in full control of his actions and should be considered for a lesser sentence. However, the prosecution countered that Berry had deliberately planned the attack and had full knowledge of what he was doing. They pointed to his methodical execution of the shooting, his lack of remorse, and his detailed writings about committing mass murder. In 1997, Berry Lukaitis was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, and 1 count of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 2 life terms plus an additional 205 years in prison, ensuring that he would never be released. His conviction stood as one of the harshest penalties given to a juvenile school shooter at the time. Years later, in 2017, Berry was granted a resentencing hearing due to changes in juvenile sentencing laws. The U.S. Supreme Court had ruled that mandatory life sentences without parole for juveniles were unconstitutional, prompting many states to reconsider long sentences given to young offenders. During the hearing, Berry expressed deep remorse for his actions, apologizing to the victims' families and stating that he wished he could take back what he had done.
You shouldn't have to go through that. And it was because I was stupid, and because I was pathetic, and because I was weak.
Despite his plea for leniency, the court upheld his sentence, though he was given the possibility of parole after serving 25 years. The families of the victims expressed relief that Berry would remain incarcerated for the foreseeable future. The case of Berry Lukaitis remains a grim reminder of the dangers of unchecked mental health struggles, the influence of violent media, and the devastating consequences of school shootings. On December 1, 1997, 14-year-old Michael Carneal walked into Heath High School in West Paducah, Kentucky, carrying a .22 caliber Ruger Mk2 semi-automatic pistol. As students gathered in the school lobby for a morning prayer meeting, Michael pulled out the firearm and began shooting. In a matter of seconds, he fired 10 rounds, striking 8 students. 3 young girls, Kay Stager, Jessica James, and Nicole Hadley, were killed, while 5 others were seriously injured. The attack stunned a small, religious community, leaving lasting scars on the survivors and their families. After emptying his weapon, Michael dropped the gun and surrendered without resistance. He reportedly told the principal, "Kill me, please. I'm sorry," showing immediate remorse for his actions. Law enforcement arrived swiftly and took him into custody. A subsequent search of his belongings revealed that he had also brought 2 shotguns and 2 rifles to school, raising questions about his true intentions. Investigators later determined that Michael had stolen the gun from his neighbor's garage just days before the attack. While he had no history of violent behavior, he had reportedly spoken about committing a school shooting to classmates before the incident. Some students admitted that they did not take his threats seriously, dismissing them as jokes. This revelation fueled discussions about the importance of recognizing warning signs and taking threats of violence seriously. The legal proceedings that followed were complex. Since Michael was only 14 at the time of the shooting, he was not eligible for the death penalty under Kentucky law. He was charged as an adult with 3 counts of murder and 5 counts of attempted murder. In October 1998, Michael pleaded guilty but mentally ill to all charges. The court sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years, a ruling that sparked debate about the appropriate punishment for juvenile offenders who commit mass violence. Over the years, Michael's mental health became a significant focus in discussions about his case. Psychologists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, a condition that reportedly contributed to his actions. Court documents revealed that Michael experienced hallucinations and delusions, believing he was being controlled by external forces. In 2022, after serving 25 years in prison, Michael Carneal became eligible for parole. His parole hearing was highly publicized, with survivors and families of the victims testifying against his release. Many argue that the trauma he caused was too great and that he remained a threat to society. Michael, appearing before the parole board via video call, expressed remorse for his actions and stated that he struggled to understand his own motivations at the time of the shooting.
I don't remember firing the gun or how many times I fired it, but the next thing I remember is people laying on the ground.
Despite his pleas for a second chance, the parole board ultimately denied his request, ensuring that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. The denial of Michael parole was met with mixed reactions. For many victims' families, it provided a sense of justice and closure, knowing that he would never walk free. Others, however, questioned whether a teenager suffering from severe mental illness should have been sentenced so harshly without adequate treatment options. His case reignited discussions about how the justice system handles juvenile offenders and the intersection between mental illness and violent crime. The shooting at Heath High School remains a painful memory for the community of West Paducah. Colt Gray's case is one of the most chilling examples of how a combination of negligence, access to firearms, and ignored warning signs can lead to unimaginable tragedy. On September 4th, 2024, Colt, a 14-year-old sophomore at Appalachian High School in Georgia, walked into his school armed with an AR-style rifle and opened fire, killing 2 students and 2 teachers. The shooting sent shockwaves through the community and reignited debates about gun control, parental responsibility, and school safety. The day began like any other Appalachian High School. Students were moving between classes, teachers were preparing their lessons, and the hallways buzzed with the usual chatter of teenagers. But at 12:50 p.m., everything changed. Colt, who had hidden the rifle in his backpack, emerged from a bathroom and began firing indiscriminately in the hallway. Chaos erupted as students and staff scrambled for safety, some fleeing to the football field while others barricaded themselves in classrooms. By the time the shooting stopped, 4 people lay dead and several others were injured. Colt, realizing he was surrounded by police, surrendered without resistance. The aftermath of the shooting was devastating. The community was left in shock, struggling to comprehend how a 14-year-old could carry out such a horrific act. Questions immediately arose about how Colt had obtained the weapon. Investigators soon discovered that the AR-style rifle used in the shooting had been a Christmas gift from his father, Colin Gray. This revelation sparked outrage and led to intense scrutiny of Colt's family. How could a parent give a teenager such a deadly weapon? And why were there no safeguards in place to prevent this tragedy? As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that there had been numerous warning signs leading up to the shooting. A year earlier, in 2023, the FBI had received tips that Colt had been making threats on Discord, a popular online messaging platform. In these messages, Colt had hinted at planning a school shooting. When questioned by authorities, Colt denied the allegations, and his father assured investigators that the family's firearms were securely locked away, with no access granted to Colt.
Say something about school shooting? Never, I just told him, I don't know what. Maybe they misheard somebody else. I would never say I would threaten. You never ever said.
Without concrete evidence linking Colt directly to the threats, the investigation was dropped, and no further action was taken. However, the signs of trouble did not end there. In the months leading up to the shooting, Colt's behavior had become increasingly concerning. His parents had recently separated, and he was reportedly being bullied at school. His mother, Marcy Gray, had noticed a significant change in her son's demeanor and had even reached out to the school 6 days before the shooting, hoping to get Colt admitted to a treatment facility. Colt had agreed to seek help, but the process was not fast enough to prevent the tragedy. On the morning of the shooting, Colt sent 2 chilling text messages, one to his mother saying, "I'm sorry, Mom," and another to his father, telling him, "You're not to blame for this." His mother, terrified by the messages, immediately called the school, but by then, it was too late. The shooting had already begun. In the days that followed, Marcy Gray expressed her disbelief and heartbreak, describing how she had collapsed to the ground and screamed when she first heard about the shooting, knowing deep down that her son was responsible. The legal aftermath of the shooting was complex. Colt was charged with 4 counts of felony murder and faced life in prison. Because he was a juvenile, he was not eligible for the death penalty. His father, Colin Gray, was also arrested and charged with second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and cruelty to children for allowing his son access to a firearm. The case against Colin raised important questions about parental responsibility and the consequences of giving minors access to deadly weapons. The community was left grappling with grief and anger. Many wondered if the tragedy could have been prevented if the warning signs had been taken more seriously. The scars left by the Appalachia High School shooting will remain with the community for years to come, a somber reminder of the cost of inaction. On May 3, 2023, the city of Belgrade, Serbia, was shaken to its core by an unimaginable tragedy. A 13-year-old boy, Kosta Kocic, carried out a school shooting at his elementary school, leaving 8 students and a security guard dead and 5 others injured.
A school shooting in Serbia has left 8 students and a security guard dead. The suspect, a 13-year-old male student.
The incident, one of the deadliest school shootings in Serbian history. The day began like any other at the Vladislav Ribnica Elementary School. Students were in their classrooms, teachers were conducting lessons, and the atmosphere was typical of a bustling school day. However, Kosta Kocic had other plans. Armed with a handgun, he entered the school with a chilling determination. His first act of violence was to shoot the school security guard and 2 female students in the hallway. He then proceeded to a classroom, where he opened fire, killing 7 more students and injuring 5 others. The entire attack lasted only a few minutes, but the devastation it left behind was immeasurable. After carrying out the shooting, Kosta calmly walked to the schoolyard and called the police to confess. His chilling words to the dispatcher were, "I'm Kosta Kocic, and I've just shot several people." The calmness with which he carried out the attack and reported it added another layer of horror to the already gruesome incident. When police arrived, Kosta surrendered without resistance, and the full extent of the tragedy began to unfold. The aftermath of the shooting was marked by grief, anger, and a desperate search for answers. Investigations revealed that Kosta had meticulously planned the attack for a month. He had selected his targets, mapped out the classrooms he would enter, and even practiced shooting at a range with his father, a respected radiologist. The weapons used in the massacre were legally owned by Kosta's family, raising serious questions about how a child had access to such deadly firearms. Due to his age, Kosta could not be charged with a crime under Serbian law. Instead, he was placed in a psychiatric hospital for evaluation and treatment. This decision sparked outrage among the victims' families and the broader public, many of whom felt that Kosta had escaped real punishment for his actions. The fact that he would eventually be allowed to continue his education and potentially reintegrate into society only added to the sense of injustice felt by those affected. Kosta's parents were not spared from scrutiny. His father, who had taken him to shooting ranges and taught him how to handle firearms, was arrested and charged with allowing his son access to weapons. His mother was charged with criminal neglect, as she had reportedly noticed nothing unusual in Kosta's behavior leading up to the shooting, aside from him being slightly lethargic at breakfast on the day of the attack. Both parents face intense public backlash, with many blaming them for enabling the tragedy. In July 2023, Kosta testified against his father during the trial, admitting that he had been taught to shoot and that his father had admired his accuracy. He also revealed that his fascination with video games and a documentary about mass murders had contributed to his dark thoughts. While Kosta expressed regret for his actions, claiming that he had changed his mind and would not carry out the shooting if he could turn back time, his words offered little comfort to the grieving families. The case prompted a national conversation about gun control in Serbia, with calls for stricter regulations on firearm ownership and storage. It also highlighted the need for better mental health support for young people and more effective systems for identifying and addressing potential threats in schools. In the months following the shooting, Kosta's future became a contentious issue. His mother requested arrangements for him and his younger sister to continue their education through online schooling, as Kosta remained in a psychiatric facility. The Teachers' Council at Vladislav Ribnica Elementary School voted to expel him, but the education minister clarified that expulsion was not within their power. Instead, Kosta was allowed to resume his studies at a special school for students with health-related issues, a decision that further divided public opinion. The tragedy at Vladislav Ribnica Elementary School left an indelible mark on Serbia. On March 24, 1998, the quiet town of Jonesboro, Arkansas, was forever changed by a horrific act of violence carried out by 2 young boys, 11-year-old Andrew Golden and 13-year-old Mitchell Johnson. The two, who had meticulously planned their attack, pulled a fire alarm at Westside Middle School, luring students and teachers outside. As the school evacuated, Andrew and Mitchell, hidden in the woods nearby, opened fire with rifles and handguns. In just 10 minutes, they killed 4 students and 1 teacher, Shannon Wright, who died while shielding a student from the bullets. 10 others were injured before the boys were apprehended by law enforcement. The attack shocked the nation, not only because of its brutality, but also because of the ages of the perpetrators. Andrew and Mitchell's actions raised urgent questions about juvenile violence, access to firearms, and the factors that could drive children to commit such atrocities. The aftermath of the shooting was marked by grief, anger, and a desperate search for answers. The investigation revealed that the boys had spent weeks planning the attack. They had stolen 9 firearms and approximately 2,000 rounds of ammunition from Andrew's grandfather, who owned a large collection of weapons. The boys had also packed supplies, including food and camping gear, into a van they parked in the woods behind the school, suggesting they had planned to escape after the shooting. Their preparation and cold-blooded execution of the plan stunned investigators and the public alike. In the immediate aftermath, the community of Jonesboro was left reeling. Funerals were held for the victims, and the school became a site of mourning and remembrance. Due to their ages, Andrew and Mitchell could not be tried as adults under Arkansas law. Instead, they were sent to juvenile detention, where they were required to remain until they turned 21. This decision was met with mixed reactions. While some believe the boys deserve harsher punishment, others argue that their youth and potential for rehabilitation warranted a more lenient approach. However, the fact that they would be released at such a young age left many in the community feeling uneasy. After their release, the lives of Andrew and Mitchell took very different paths. Mitchell Johnson, who was 13 at the time of the shooting, struggled to reintegrate into society. He continued to have run-ins with the law, including arrests for drug possession, theft, and fraud. His inability to stay out of trouble suggested that the issues that had contributed to the shooting had not been fully addressed during his time in juvenile detention. Mitchell's life after release became a cautionary tale about the challenges of rehabilitating young offenders. Andrew Golden, on the other hand, attempted to live a quiet life after his release. He changed his name to Drew Douglas Grant and tried to distance himself from his past. However, his notoriety made it difficult for him to escape the shadow of the shooting. In 2019, Andrew's life came to a tragic end when he was involved in a fatal car crash. He was driving on a highway in Arkansas when he crossed the center line and collided with another vehicle, killing both drivers. His death brought a sudden and violent end to a life that had been defined by violence and destruction. The legacy of the Westside Middle School shooting remains deeply felt in Jonesboro and beyond. On January 6, 2023, the unthinkable happened at Rich Neck Elementary School in Newport News, Virginia. A 6-year-old boy, whose name was withheld due to his age, brought a 9mm handgun to school and shot his first-grade teacher, Abby Zwerner, in front of her class.
Police say a 6-year-old boy, a first grader, somehow got a hold of a gun and opened fire at his teacher, critically wounding her. The
day began like any other at Rich Neck Elementary. Abby Zwerner, a dedicated and beloved teacher, was conducting a lesson with her first-grade class. The 6-year-old boy, who had a history of behavioral issues, was seated at his desk. Without warning, he pulled out the handgun, pointed it at Abby, and fired a single shot. The bullet struck her hand and lodged in her chest. Despite her injuries, Abby managed to guide her students to safety before collapsing. Her quick thinking and bravery likely saved lives, but the trauma of the incident left an indelible mark on everyone involved. Investigations revealed that the boy had taken the gun from his mother's home. The weapon, a 9mm Taurus pistol, had allegedly been kept in a locked drawer, but the boy was able to access it. This revelation sparked widespread criticism of the boy's mother, Deja Taylor, and raised serious questions about gun storage practices in households with children. Abby Zwerner, who survived the shooting after undergoing surgery and a lengthy recovery, became a symbol of resilience and courage. In the months following the shooting, Abby filed a $40 million lawsuit against the Newport News School Board, citing negligence on the part of the school administration. She argued that there had been multiple warning signs about the boy's behavior, and that the school had failed to take appropriate action to prevent the shooting. The lawsuit revealed disturbing details about the events leading up to the shooting. The 6-year-old boy had a well-documented history of behavioral problems, including violent outbursts, threats, and physical aggression towards staff and other students. On the day of the shooting, he had reportedly threatened to beat up a classmate and had shown another student the gun he had brought to school. Despite these clear red flags, school administrators allegedly told teachers to wait out the situation rather than taking immediate action to address the threat. The school's assistant principal, Ebony Parker, who had been informed of the potential threat, was later indicted on charges of felony child neglect. Deja Taylor, the boy's mother, also faced legal consequences for her role in the tragedy. She was charged with state and federal offenses, including child neglect, making false statements about the weapon, and unlawfully possessing a firearm while using marijuana. In November 2023, Taylor was sentenced to 21 months in prison for her federal offenses and an additional 2 years for child neglect. Her case underscored the importance of parental responsibility in preventing such incidents and sparked a broader conversation about the need for stricter gun storage laws. The shooting at Rich Neck Elementary School reignited debates about gun control and school safety in the United States.